Would you like me to start with a roll call as usual? And
I
then-
would appreciate that.
All right. We'll go in alphabetical order as usual. Rich Berlandy.
Here.
Emily Brick. I'm not seeing Emily. Dave Fox.
I'm here, not in my basement.
He is here live. Bob Hannon.
I'm here.
Robert Eisner.
Here.
Mark Simpson.
Here.
Ned Stachin.
Here.
And I'll note for the record, Jay Tulin is absent. He notified us ahead of time that he will not be with us this evening. So with that, Mr. Chair, we are ready to get started.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is JRF Management LLC.
You're looking at an old agenda. I changed up the order. We're going to start with, we're going to go Winding Trails and then Mr. and Mrs. Horan and then JRF Management. So
Okay.
that the
We don't
smaller,
have a copy of the- Yeah, I don't have a copy of the new agenda then.
no.
Okay. So we'll do it your way.
Thank Thank you, sir. So we'll start with Winding Trails, and I believe we have Scott Brown and Brian Cunningham with us this evening. So, yep, you can speak at the podium, and I've got Scott. I've got the full presentation that you had provided. So if you want to introduce yourself, and then I can scroll through for whatever you'd like.
Okay, so my name is Scott Brown. I'm the Executive Director at Winding Trails. Thank you for having me here this evening. And Brian Cunningham will be joining me. He is our Vice President and Chairman of our Air and Facilities Committee. So what we have and what was presented to you a few weeks back is our plans to replace the Dunning Lake Playscape. It was actually built in 1990 and is showing its age. It is still useful, but we do have some issues in terms of the ground cover and meeting current standards with safety in terms of ground cover. So about a year ago in October, we went to the national conference in Baltimore and viewed a number of different vendors and narrowed it down to 4 and had 4 presentations and decided to go with a company called Miracle, with the installer, a local company out of West Hartford called Creative Recreation. So just in general, it's basically got 2 playscapes, which we actually have there now, a 2 to 5-year-old playscape on the left, the smaller one, and the larger 6 to 12. And then it's got a gravity track rail, which is that neat looking thing on the right, along with a couple of swings. And you'll see the artificial synthetic turf there. That is what is required for the higher elements. And we had a long discussions around what should be the proper material for there. And what we ran into was a lot of issues because obviously we have Dunning Lake Beach and the sand migrating into some of the other surfaces that we considered negated their effectiveness and fall zones and that kind of stuff. So this actually worked out. I think you've got a cut sheet of it. It's actually a sand infill, and there will be some maintenance we'll do weekly in terms of mixing that stuff up. But yeah, that's a picture Shannon brought up there of it. Brian, if you want to come up, Brian's got some more specifics in terms of location and proximity to the water and those type of things, and I'll let him discuss those things.
Thank you, Scott. Commissioners, my name's Brian Cunningham, professional engineer, state of Connecticut. Also, as Scott mentioned, I'm chairman of the Area Facilities Committee as well as vice president of the board of directors. You read my mind.
I've got this one and I've got an aerial. So the next,
I'd like to speak from that one for now.
this one, sure,
Yes.
certainly.
Thank you. And I hope my binder doesn't do anything to your keyboard. There. So at the bottom of it's a 20 scale 8.5 by 11 plan that I put together showing the layout configuration of the elements. The nearest element to the edge of the lake is 100 feet, measured perpendicular down, yes. We do have a small expansion, about 1,350 square feet to the northeast, the back side of the elements. What was driving that was the fall zone for the swing sets that we put in, one for the older kids, which is on the southerly side, the other one. And then the small babies and toddlers, they have their little baskets to swing in there, and that also has a fall zone that extends outward. So we wanted to cover that with the new surfacing that we're proposing. And then to the north is the younger kid elements. And that also extended a little about 15 feet out into the grassed area that we put in. So the in the southeast corner is a climbing element. We call it the Pegasus. That's going to remain. That's there today. The placement of the elements. One of the things that we considered in laying this out was the sight line from our lifeguards pavilion, which is right near the Pegasus. Come down to the, no, not that far. Right near the Pegasus. It's faint. I should have highlighted it. Right. Come down. You can see a little rectangle. I can hardly see it on my side, but yeah, on this side it shows up better. So the guards that are not on duty but are on the beach usually hang out in that area, and we like them being able to see the whole beach, whereas the guards on the towers are more responsible for the people in the water. So as far as concern with during construction, we would put a silt sock on the beach, probably about midway down, because we see vehicle access for bringing material to the site coming in at the top end of the beach, coming down from our driveway in front of the boathouse and looping up at the edge of the beach. So we don't want to impede the vehicular access. As Shannon's got her mouse coming in, yes. So we'll have some silt sock out to control the runoff, or any runoff that might be an issue during the construction, which shouldn't take all that long, really. As far as the sequence of construction, we'll take down the existing elements except for the Pegasus. We'll remove the existing sand to the natural soil, and then we're going to be placing about 4 inches or so, probably a little on the heavier side of that, of processed stone base compacted, and then we'll leave. That's a better view. Yeah. So there's a pre-step to putting in the compact base, and that's an edge board, and it includes a nailer that's used later on for the to hold the geo, what do they call that? I wrote it down somewhere, but the grass looking material that gets nailed down to this nailer, and then there'll be a sand infill in that grass material. Between the grass layer and the compacted stone, there's a 2 to 3 inch layer of recycled material. It's a impact surface that's sealed off from the environment. The Playscape installer will fine grade that surface. They'll set foundations for the new elements and install all the components to the system. Plan to start, upon getting approvals. We'd like to start after our acoustic festival in October. Get most of the site work done before winter, and that way we'd be able to get up and going, anytime over the winter into the spring. I think that's it, unless anybody's going to end up with some questions. We'd be happy to, either Scott or myself can address any questions that anybody has.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
All right, start with Rich.
I don't have any questions. Looks like a good project.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, just one quick question. The schematic showed envirofill or sand. The envirofill looked like it was some sort of green globules. You're not going to use that. You're going to use sand. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
No questions, thank you.
Mark?
No questions for me.
Ned?
Yeah, are they gonna use this optional concrete border?
No, that will not be used. That'll be just bordered by the sand.
Okay. And when I'm just trying to figure out, so when I look at some of your general digitally made photos of this thing, you got like a green area and a white area. Yeah, like something like that picture. There's a couple of them. So is the white area just gonna be regular sand, and then this green area is the astro cushioned whatever?
Yeah, exactly. So that, the green is the synthetic surfacing, and everything you see here white would be our regular beach sand, which is actually brown looking, but it would be regular beach sand that we get from done each year.
Yeah, and then Mike, sorry.
Sorry,
Scott.
sorry about that. Yes, that, the green is a synthetic turf, and all the white in that graphic is actually our beach sand. So it would be browner in color, but it would be the sand that we've got there now.
Okay. I think that's all I had. Yeah, it looks like a good project.
Yeah, that's it, Ned?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Just a quick question. It sounds like you're talking about starting to do some of the groundwork in October. Is that to allow people to still continue to use what's there sort of over the summer, then gearing up more towards the fall and into maybe late fall to go ahead and start getting this stuff in so you're ready to go by spring?
That's correct. We've got other playscapes on the property, and we would just close this playscape for the fall, starting in the fall, until the elements are complete and we're able to open this new playscape. The grand opening won't be till next summer, but it'll be in use before then.
Okay, so that was all that I had. Thanks. So Shannon, we need to decide whether or not we're accepting an application or determining if it's a permitted activity is non-regulated.
Correct.
So Rich, you want to voice your initial opinion?
It's almost bordering on maintenance of the existing facility. So I wouldn't classify it as a major activity.
Can you grab the box of my mother's stuff and drag it over here? We try to carry out.
Sorry about that. We had a little commotion over here. So,
Problem.
Dave?
Yeah, I guess it's just really replacing what's there now for the most part. So I don't see a problem with that.
Robert?
It's a non-significant regulated activity.
Okay, Mark?
I agree. It's normal maintenance. It's replacing something that needs to be replaced. I don't see this as a major issue.
Okay, Ned?
Yeah, as long as we're clear that they are using sand as the infill on the AstroTurf and not whatever those green globules are, because I would be concerned if it was envirofill. But if we know we're using sand and that's the thing, then I think it's just you know, replacing similar materials, replacing a similar facility with just an update. So is that clear? Is that in the record somewhere that they're using sand and not EnviroFill?
Yes.
Okay, then yeah, I think it's a normal use.
Okay, I have a question when people are talking about a normal use. Robert, I think you said it's a non-significant activity, but it is regulated, so you're leaning towards an application. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what people are saying here.
Yes, that's correct, Bob. I think that this is something that would require an application because it's not, if it's, I would view repair work more like a, plunge pool from a stormwater system that it requires maintenance. This is, I think this is, clearly it's replacing an existing structure, but there's a fair amount of activity occurring, albeit 100-foot separating distance. I still think it's an application.
Okay, and I agree with what you're saying because that's sort of my take on it too. But I just want to go back and get a clarification from other folks because I'm not sure the terminology that folks were using. I'm still a little ambiguous as to exactly which way you were looking at it. So, Rich, if you do me a favor and just sort of clarify where you're coming from on this.
Yeah, I would agree with Robert.
Okay, and David?
I would too.
Okay, Mark? I'll come back to Mark. We'll try Ned.
Yeah, I would agree that we should have an application for this.
Okay. Then Mark? Did we lose him?
He's still there, but Mark, we don't have your audio. Looks like he's got interference of some kind. 'Cause I can see the mic moving, but he's not there.
Okay. So it sounds like what we're leaning for is that we would accept the application. So,
Excuse me, Mark wrote and I agree
oh, okay.
in chat. I agree application is necessary.
Thanks, Ned. I just saw it. Okay.
Okay.
So can I get a motion to accept the application?
Dave will do that.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, Ned.
Okay, I think everybody was pretty much uniform on this. So those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining. But I also agree with you guys that it's a good project. So that'll take care of this for the evening. Thank you.
Do you want a site walk or do you want to determine significance at this particular
No, I
point?
think Robert had said initially that this was not a significant activity, but it was regulated.
Okay. Do we want to
So,
vote on that tonight or what do you want to wait?
yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that independently. I mean, does somebody want to make a motion that this is not a significant activity?
So moved by Robert.
Is there a second?
I'll second Ned.
Okay. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay,
Alrighty,
okay.
very much. So we'll finish up in 2 weeks then.
Okay.
All right.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And seeing as how I don't have a copy of the current agenda or the new one, what's next?
So what's next? We are going to chat with Brian and Crystal Haran regarding 6 Carrington Lane and an expansion to their home. I'll bring that up here. So, and I believe we have Brian and Crystal on the phone. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
taking the time, and Shannon, thank you for helping expedite the process. It's been a hectic week for us, but we're excited to present, and I'm actually excited to be home. It's been about 19 years since I graduated, grew up in Farmington, and my wife, myself, and our 2-year-old daughter are back home, and we're really excited. So what we have proposed today is, we're hoping to get approval to do roughly an 8x12 bump out addition on the southern side of our home. And as you can see on the map here, the rear setback is right in that 20-foot range. However, there is an existing deck that puts us probably somewhere in the 12.5 to 13-foot range of that boundary, inclusive of the wetlands that surround our property. And what we're asking for is that the addition would basically be a 2-level addition. It would go out only as far as the current existing deck. And I think with regards to being aware of the environment and any of the steps that we would need to take, I know there's a couple of different ways to go about the actual construction, whether it's extending the crawl space. We currently do not have a basement at this property, so it would be either extending the crawl space and building out on a foundation, or entertaining the idea of building on top of the existing pillars that are there right now for the deck. I think from the specifics of everything and kind of what we've been briefed on, that's probably a very simple explanation. I'm not sure if there are any questions. We just feel that in addition to the space that we need and hope that we can get approval for, this also being in the historic district, and we've had some conversations with our immediate neighbors, and I think this is the most easy way to gain this space without really changing the structure of the house or the integrity of the neighborhood. And obviously we learned this past week that the wetlands are a big part of that as well. So that's why we're here today, and certainly open to any questions, feedback, and kind of your guidance as we go through this process.
Okay. Thank you. So Rich, I'll start with you for any comments or questions.
No, I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
It sounds like you're not sure whether there's going to be any excavation involved with this project. Is that right?
Early.
Yeah, we're very, very early in the process. We actually were able to, rush to get the application in. So we were on the docket for the Plan and Zoning Committee that meets in July. Otherwise, I don't believe they meet again until September. So, we haven't really gotten to that point, and understand that, both this committee and the town would certainly be involved as we move forward. We would love to meet anyone for a site walk. We can certainly set up, some time to meet with the contractor that we're using. He's a family friend, married my sister's best friend. So again, we're excited to be home, and really are open to doing anything that you guys need to help make sure that this goes as smooth as possible, provided that we get approval to move forward.
Okay, I guess we almost kind of have to answer that question before we can approve it, I would think, but that's only my opinion.
The worst case would be they've got to excavate for the crawl. Mr. Horan, if you can confirm, the worst case would be the crawl space, correct? There will not be a full basement. The rest of the home doesn't have a full basement.
Correct. That is correct.
And the depth of the current crawl space at your home is approximately what's the floor to ceiling height approximately?
Definitely not more than.
I have to use one of those dolly carts to roll around down there. I'm about 6'1", so
30 inches.
maybe 30 inches. I've already hit my head a few times.
Okay, no,
I can get that measurement for you later this evening or tomorrow. But yeah, that would be the absolute worst case scenario from a development standpoint, would be the crawl space.
So I think
Plan on that as the worst case.
it's the worst case. So I think that's provides a decent understanding to the commission. Thank you.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, Robert?
Yeah, I think that I'll conclude that this is going to be a use as of right for residential property, but I do have a couple of questions just to affirm getting there. I'm assuming this is an older home. It probably predates the regulations by quite some bit. Is that correct?
No, actually, the subdivision approval was in 93.
I believe it was 1993.
Okay.
So it predates having a separate inland wetland commission. The TPZ and the inland wetland worked together as a combined, and so that's the approval that was provided in 1993 with the subdivision.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. In the existing area behind the house, is that all lawn right now?
Yeah, so it's really deck, and then there's a thin piece of lawn, and then our property kind of butts up to the wetlands. I think it's a combination of the land trust, and then one of our neighbors that is more on the front of, is it Colton Street, I think?
Yeah.
But it's vegetation, and it's not grass or anything like that.
Well, no, it is grass. It's like 10, 12 feet of grass behind the deck.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah.
I thought you meant past our grass. Well, what's in that area? But yeah, there's probably about, like my wife said, that area that you see from where the deck is to the line, that's grass.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you're taking existing lawn and you're just going to build the structure there. And Shannon, can you help explain the lines that were shown on the previous? I just want to figure out where the property line is and where the wetlands are.
Yep.
Yeah, on that shot there.
So I'm going to do this real quick. I guess this just provides a cleaner view. Sorry, I've got too many pop-up things over here that are in the way. There we go.
We have a lot of maps printed on our end.
Yeah,
So
we actually thought the wetlands was only on the front. We were surprised to see it does wrap around the back.
So this is the subdivision plan from 1993. This is the Horan's property here. This is the wetland boundary that was delineated at the time of the subdivision. And it originally came through as a standard subdivision, and then came through, was basically reapplied and came through as a cluster subdivision. So the remnant land could be, you can see it's deeded, it's open space here, but you can see this wetland line comes around and pretty much follows just outside the property line. So this is the setback line here that they need to follow. So this is a side yard setback, and then this is the rear setback here. So I'm going to flip back to the other map, but I thought this would be helpful because it shows at least wetland property line, setback line fairly clearly here. And when
Yes,
we
it's very helpful.
come back here, those lines are still there. It's just, there's a lot more detail on it. So here's the same, here's the property line, is the dark heavy line. This is the wetland area. You can see the arrows, and it's changed. It's a dashed dot line. So it's the 2 dash and a line, 2 dash and a line. And you can see it here sneak out to the outside of the property line, as we had seen on the subdivision plan. And then this is the 20-foot setback, side setback line here. So that 20-foot setback line, and then the 25-foot rear setback. Is that helpful?
It is. It helps a lot. So again, I think the conclusion I'll reach is it's a use as of right for residential property. It's the conversion of lawn to a structure, and it doesn't appear that there is, the separating distance between the structure and the wetland is not going to be any less than before this. So I'm comfortable with what's being proposed. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Mark?
Mark chats that he has no questions.
Okay. Ned?
So you are going over the building line though. And so are they gonna have to go to planning and zoning for that, or a ZBA?
So that this is was precipitated by an application that Horan's made to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and as luck would have it, I'm agent to ZBA as well. So when I was reviewing the legal notice, realized that this was also going to need, at a minimum, a discussion with our Inland Wetland Commission to determine if it's permitted as of right.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, it's not a big encroachment. They're still within what they have built as a deck right now, basically. On one of the sketches, it looked like they were gonna build a deck out on the other, like a patio at grade level on the other side. You have a deck on this side and the other side. I
Yes.
thought I saw,
Yeah, there is an
Existing.
existing patio off.
okay,
I guess
so
we'll
that's
look-
existing?
Yeah,
correct.
it's there.
Okay. All right. Are there, do you know, do you see any wetland markers on the property?
I'd have to walk the property again. I know that the land trust signs are
Has
very
markers,
visible.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd have to go back and take a more in-depth look. There's
I've never seen any wetland sign, but they might be there. There's
Yeah.
a lot of vegetation back there.
there are little signs on posts and they are easy to miss sometimes. I'm just,
I don't believe there's a
wondering.
conservation easement on this.
oh, there isn't? Okay,
No, because the land outside their property is the land trust, and that's normally where we'd put the conservation easement. So if the land trust markers are there, that's really providing
All right.
the benefit that the conservation easement markers would.
okay. I don't know, from what I could see on, from those photos, those look like some pretty small posts. I have, I would bet that if this is gonna be, this addition is gonna be 2 levels, those aren't gonna cut it. So I think you are gonna need a foundation. But I don't think, being that it's just a crawl space and, you go down the frost line and I don't think it'd be a lot of excavation. And you'll use, silt socks or whatever the town recommends around the area of the excavation.
yes, certainly.
Of course,
We'd
whatever.
use whatever you recommend. We'd meet with Jeff, our contractor, and make sure that everything's to your satisfaction.
Okay.
And
Uh,
typically when this comes in for building permit, it will require a building permit, and it'll have an engineering and erosion control sign off.
Yep.
And Bruce coordinates with the contractor at that time to
Okay.
ensure the erosion control is installed, and Bruce goes out and inspects it. And so it's done prior to any construction work starting.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for questions. Thank you.
Hey, Shannon, can you go to slide 5? I think that's the one. Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, you have the little bump out on the house right now. That would be moving out further to the edge of where the deck is.
Correct.
So this entire 2-story addition that you want to put on
It's right there.
would still fall within the existing perimeter of the deck, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, from that perspective, I mean, I agree with Robert. I think this is, an acceptable use with the residential property. It's already been developed, although you may be changing it. To me, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I think it's probably something that can be approved as of right. Again, I would be concerned about the erosion control, but again, as Shannon was saying, that's all something that can be addressed at the time somebody applies for the building permit, and she's very familiar with what the commission typically looks for. So I'm very confident with that being addressed. So, but it's not really changing the exterior perimeter of what's on the property right now, other than you're going up 2 stories pretty much above the deck. So I mean, that's really all I have. So, I mean,
I had a question for Shannon, just for my information. So you sent us some site development plans that showed 2 lots. Those are what was combined to make this lot, and then the majority of it, the wetland area, was turned over to the town or the whatever.
Kind of, it's the other way around. This was all one lot, and it came in for a subdivision, and they were approved as a cluster subdivision. And as part of Farmington's regulations for a cluster subdivision, you're allowed smaller or modified setbacks and lot sizes in order to preserve natural resources. So that's what was done here.
Okay.
They were allowed, so if they had done a traditional subdivision, I believe it's R40. So basically you would have split this lot in half here, right? And you would have had one lot and two lots. And there wouldn't have been any designated preservation of land or resources.
Yeah, if you go down a couple pages,
Right,
there's something that shows two houses.
that was the original, so that's what I'm saying,
Okay.
that was the original proposal. And
Okay.
the commission, so this is what it would have looked like originally,
All right.
right? But then there's no preservation of area and no set aside to either come to the town as open space or to the land trust. So by doing a cluster subdivision, the property owner still has the benefit of getting two lots. And we, as a community, have the benefit of having natural resources preserved.
Okay.
That's the purpose of the cluster subdivision. So you end up with smaller lots, but the natural resources are preserved and set aside. And in this case, it was deeded over to the land trust rather than coming as open space to the town of Farmington. And I'd have to go through and take a look at all the records as to why, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's still being
Right.
preserved as open space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Shannon, we need to make a decision, right, as to whether or not this is
Correct. Yep.
a
Thank you.
use that's sort of allowed under the regulations for
Correct.
residential use.
Correct.
Would somebody care to make a motion to that effect?
This is Robert. I move that the project be allowed or approved as a use as of right for residential property. And Shannon, do you have the regulatory citation?
Yes, section 4.A.4.
Yes, 4A.4. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Dave will second.
Okay. I mean, it sounded like everybody was pretty much on board with that. So I'll just go right to vote. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Good luck at ZBA.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your
Appreciate it.
consideration.
Thank you both for calling in this evening.
Thank you, Shannon.
Bob, or Mr. Chairman, this is Robert. Just for the Fran, just make sure that if you go through ZBA and it's approved, make sure that your contractor works closely with the town staff because you are in very close proximity to the wetlands. So you want to make sure that your soil and erosion control is put up first and that they don't move any equipment into the wetlands because then that would be problematic. But if you work with Shannon, everything will go fine.
Noted. Thank you.
Will do.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Good comment. I'll defer to you, Shannon.
Sorry, Bob. Yes,
That's
now
all
we're
right.
going to go to JRF Management LLC and Code Real Estate Development LLC. I believe we have a number of people on the phone, so I don't know whoever wants to take the lead, please introduce yourself and we can get started this evening.
Good evening to members of the commission. My name is Robin Pearson. I am an attorney with the law firm of Walter and Pearson in Glastonbury, Connecticut. And I am here this evening on behalf of the applicant, JRF Management LLC, which is the owner of the application site, and also Coyote Real Estate Development LLC, which has a portion of the site under contract for residential development. The properties, there are several properties actually that are comprise this development site of 24.85 acres, which is located between Farmington Avenue to the north of the site and the Farmington River to the south of the site. It comprises 4 parcels, 1349 and 1371 Farmington Avenue, and lots 8218 and 8237. They are all part of the Midpoint mixed-use development proposal, which is a combination of new residential development and redevelopment and repurposing of the McCullen commercial side of the site, all to create this mixed use concept, which is fairly unique under the new zoning that's in place. The applicants are also intending to connect the public bike trail through the south part of the site. And that connection will be made right now to the west by connecting to land owned by the town of Farmington. We'll be seeking your approval as part of this application to make that connection, which will involve disturbing alluvial soils, which are deposited on the town of Farmington site. And our reason for doing so is really to make it a little bit easier for the town, so that the town will not have to come forward and present an application at the time of making that connection. The regulated activities associated with site development are proposed within the upland review area along the Farmington River, and also within alluvial soil deposits, which are in the center of the site. As you listen to our presentation, please keep in mind that we are not proposing any direct wetland disturbances or impacts to any poorly drained wetland soils or to the river itself. But as you know, under Connecticut wetland law, alluvial soils are considered wetland soils. And while the alluvial soils in the center of our site, and there are some fairly sizable deposits in the center of the site, will clearly need to be disturbed in order for this development proposal to go forward. We intend to demonstrate for you that the alluvial soils in this location do not function as wetland soils, and therefore we do not believe they need to be protected as a wetland resource. And we certainly hope you'll feel the same way after we have presented all our information that we've been able to pull together with regard to that particular issue. We really do believe this to be a carefully thought out, well-researched and well-documented application. The site plan has been, over a period of time, designed to be very sensitive to the environmental resources on the site, particularly to the Farmington River. And obviously, we're very pleased to be able to make the bike trail connection and our construction of that bike trail through the site a key component of the application that you are going to consider. We have, as you will recall, it was in December of 2020, December 2, 2020, we did come before this agency to make an informal presentation on our wetland proposal. And very soon thereafter, the master plan and rezoning of this site to the mixed use development zone was approved, midpoint development zone was approved, and that was on December 7th, 2020. And since then, we have made some changes. Basically, well, many of them have been in response to a review we had with the Architectural Design Review Committee. There have been some adjustments to the site plan. We believe they're certainly still well in keeping with the master plan as approved, but are just improvements to the site. So things may look a little different from what you saw back in December of 2020. Our presentation tonight will start off with Phil Doyle from LADA, a land planning organization with which you're familiar. And he is going to go through some of the background history of the site, describe for you the site development plan, and outline for you the regulated areas, discuss proposed grading and planting, and in particular treatment of invasives, for which there is a comprehensive plan proposed for this site. He'll be followed by Tom Daly, our engineer with SLR, and Tom's going to go through our drainage plan, which incorporates LID techniques to ensure that there is a good amount of groundwater recharge as a component of this application, and he'll discuss the utilities, a significant feature of which is the relocation of the existing sewer line that goes to the site. And he'll also touch on the on the erosion and sedimentation control provisions that are included in this plan. And then finally, he'll be followed by Megan Raymond, also with SLR. She's a principal scientist on wetlands and waterways, and she is going to go through her soils report. They did, the wetlands on the site were delineated, and also present to you her impact assessment, a report of which you have in the file. So I'm ready to turn it over to them, but I should note one housekeeping matter before they begin, and that is that we did provide notice as required by statute to the Connecticut Water Company and the Department of Public Health with regard to the fact that this is a project that's proposed for a aquifer area in the town of Farmington. So with that, Phil, are you ready to take over?
Yes, Robin, Phil Doyle. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yep, all set.
Yes.
Can I ask Shannon in a second to go to the approved master plan for the midpoint zone? I'd point out that this is the colored rendering of our the current plan. The L3. Hopefully, everyone on the commission has the plans either electronically or as a hard copy, and you could look at the L3 plan. That was the plan that was shown in the formal discussion that Robin alluded to in December. And in form, it's very much like the current proposal. This entire site development evolved from, as we might have explained in December, from a desire stemming from the planning department at the town hall to see the McCallum building, which is the complex of buildings up in the left-hand corner of this property. There is a metal building and then a taller masonry building that we're all used to driving past. It's been there since the early 20s and underutilized for most of that period. There's been a desire to see that put back into life, and the thought had been, since there was very little activity on this larger piece of property, the McCallum building is 2.5 or so acres of land, and the balance of the site is over 20. The only real activity that has taken place on the balance of the land over time has been excavation, earth excavation. The Farmington River in the 50s and 60s was widened and soil was taken from these properties, and the properties left fallow at that point, so that we now have second or third level growth on the property, a lot of invasive species, and people felt that there might be an interesting opportunity for redevelopment if the property were rezoned to a mixed-use complex. And part of the price for that was that with the evolution of the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail, big mouthful, but the bike trail that my wife and I use, and I'm sure many of you use, that has become a prominent feature in town, and there is no intersection on or close to Farmington Avenue, Route 4. And the town master plan for alternate means of transportation, bike paths and sidewalks, that was part of the plan of conservation and development, has constantly promoted the extension of bike paths down Farmington Avenue from the center of town. And that plan also shows a bike path connection at this property. In fact, the bike path connection would extend also into the town park immediately to the west on the other side of the railroad abutment. So one of the prices that came with the evolution of the midpoint zone was the extension, as Rob pointed out, of the bike path. It's put upon the developer to find a way to connect to a bike path that's some 30 feet higher than the site, and then to take the bike path as close to the river as possible so that the public could be provided with views of the river. And then extend that bike path in two ways. One, bring it over to our eastern boundary, and our eastern boundary is the property line where the entry drive goes into Plant 17. And the idea on the town plan of conservation and development in terms of connections has been that the bike path that this site would construct would, and Robin or Shannon rather could point this out, would connect to the bicycle path, the bicycle path sidewalk on Farmington Avenue. And it would also allow for a connection to the south, closer to the river, that at some point in the future, yep, right down in there somewhere, Shannon, where it would then continue through the Plant 17 property, perhaps coming out down further to the east by the temple, so that the bike path would have two options. So that's what we have planned for. The other part of the zone that evolved was that the town land use department was very sensitive to the Farmington River, and one of the stipulations in the zoning regulation, and this is not necessarily in the wetland regulation, but it's in the zoning regulation, that there be no direct stormwater discharges to the Farmington River. The intention had been to isolate all of the drainage on the property and not allow, with the development that might happen, any drainage discharges. So as we put a master plan together and the Town Planning and Zoning Commission approved the plan that's in front of you, that gives us a guide for moving forward. And in that process, we also had conversations with architectural review. And you'll notice on the plan that's immediately in front of you, one of the comments of architectural review, for example, had been, is there any way to pull the development tighter? It's sprawling a little bit. And if you take a look, Shannon, at the, if you put your cursor on that building number 8 that's farthest to the right there, we've been working at trying over time to pull the development together, increase the amount of sidewalks internally. And in doing that, you might remember in our conversation in December, one of the things that this site is encumbered by, it's a linear piece of property, 1,700 feet long. It's got at least that much frontage on the river, perhaps more because of Wiggles. But there's town trunk sewer lines that run through the property that run from Unionville down to the plant, close to the village in Farmington, and those lines are not straight. And one of those lines on this particular plan, Shannon, if you took your cursor and you go back to the area right in there, right between building number 6 and the pool that is shown on this plan, there is the sewer line dips down. Right in there is the pool. And there's a reason why on this particular plan the pool was at an angle. It's because the sewer line runs right through there, runs down to a point right about in there, and then diagonals back up and comes within 100 feet of the river. One of the attributes of the presently proposed plan is we are proposing to move that sewer line at some expense, move it into the center of the site, take it from where it is now at about 100 feet from the river and bring it back about 220 feet from the river and place it within the central driveway that's on the property. So we've been responding over the past few months to a number of different inputs. And I think we have a reasonable plan, and perhaps Shannon, let's go to that color rendered plan. And you can see what's happened. We dragged the building number 8 in about 140 feet on the eastern boundary, pull that into the more of the core of the site. And down that main street, we've pulled the sewer line away from the river, and we'll be running the sewer line down the main street, actually shortening its length to some degree. And we have the same amount of buildings, a pool and community center complex. So Shannon, if you could step this back a little bit so that we can see more of the entire site, that would be helpful. Just to give us a sense of where we are, there are the identified wetlands that Megan Raymond picked up. Those have been picked up by the surveyor, and they are shown in a blue line that runs right through there. You're right on top of it. Right through there, it runs around a peninsula that was left in the excavation efforts that happened on the property, and then runs along basically the base of an embankment. There is a 150-foot upland review area that's also in blue. It's that line there. Shannon is tracing it, and we have parts of 3 buildings. They've been identified in the data table. Section of building number 8, a small corner of building number 5, building number 6, and a corner of building number 5 in the upland review area. And we have a part of the pool and some sidewalks. We're proposing a pavilion down on the peninsula that would be an open air sort of gazebo that would be sitting down on the peninsula right there. And for the residents of this property that would be renting apartments here, on our detail sheet, one of the planting detail sheets, we've shown a detail of a floating dock that is part of this application. We'd like to be able to have a launch point for kayaks. Everyone, I think you're all aware of where this is on the river, sort of diagonally across from the town boathouse. It's a lovely stretch of river, and it's be wonderful for kayaking. So right in there, we're seeking permission to have a seasonal dock. Perhaps if you've read the data in the narrative that we've provided, we have about in our upland review area, we have about 40,000 square feet of impervious surface in the upland review area proposed, and that's mostly the rooftops of the buildings that we've talked about, some deck area around the pool, and half of it is the bike path. The bike path is shown in that light bluish gray color, and the bike path would descend down from its ramp up to the bridge, and would go from the west to the east, following Shannon's cursor. And would follow in the area of what we're looking at here. It would follow an existing trail that has been on the property for some number of years, but there's a trail through the woods, and that's where we've placed the alignment of the bike path. Once you get to the middle of the property near the peninsula, the bike path would follow an alignment that would be about 20 feet back from the escarpment that drops down to the river, and that would run for 400 or 500 feet toward the Plant 17 boundary line, right through there. And in that area, as is along most of the bike path on the site, there would be a split rail fence, very similar, identical, basically, to the split rail fence used by the DOT for the elevated portions of bike paths. But we'd like to make sure that people are contained. They don't walk off the bike path and cause disturbance to the bank. We're also proposing to plant that edge with a continuous shrub mass of native habitat plantings that would allow the people to be separate from the river, but still see the river. Shannon, if you could point out the 175 elevation. The 175 is the FEMA flood line that runs through the property, and it's that black line right there that is between the identified poorly drained soils and the upland review area, right through there. That's important because we want to make sure that we have no disturbance within the floodplain, and that's the FEMA line. But we know that the town of Farmington in the zoning regulations has a flood zone, and even though the flood elevation line by FEMA is 175, all of the buildings have been set at 182, which would place them above the town of Farmington specific zoning regulation flood line. So the pad itself, think about grading, the property is generally level, 20 acres or so, and in the area where the buildings are being developed, perhaps the lowest elevation is about 176 and the highest is about 182. So over 25 acres, we've got about 6 feet of topo, which is almost flat. And the buildings are situated all at 182. The water drains into either catch basins or is directed into lawn areas where it would receive treatment by running through lawns and then into infiltration basins. We have proposed no direct discharges to the river. All of the water would be infiltrated into the soils, even to the extent that the bike path development, all of the water on the bike path is drained inward and into collecting areas so that none of the water from the bike path would be directly discharged toward the river. In regard to planting, we have a full planting plan together. All of the materials would be native trees, shrubs, native grasses of different types to function for different purposes, whether it's at the bottom of the detention basin or the side of an infiltration basin or a sloped area or a lawn that might be closer to one of the buildings. Shannon, could you flip to those last couple of pages that are the invasive species plans?
Yes, I will.
I wanted to touch on that for a second. Because the site has a history of being disturbed for soils excavation. Yeah, they're the colored ones at the back.
Yep, I'm just, it's easier to.
Oh, there's the dock.
You want to go back to that?
Here we go. Yeah, that's the type of dock that we'd be proposing. Would be anchored by 4 removable posts that would come out in the fall, go in the spring, and they float. But that would allow us to have access for the residents to the river without disturbing the river bank, we could direct all of the traffic onto the dock and not have to worry about people dragging their kayak down to the beach. And we think this would be a much more sanitary way of handling that situation. Shannon, can we just go to those last couple of the invasive species plan? Yes, and maybe if you backed that off a little bit so we could see more. I at one point had given the town staff and perhaps the members of the Wetland Commission had seen it, 4 pages or so of photographs taken all around the property of the extent of invasive species coverage, and it's really remarkable. The various colors on this plan are representative of where different invasive species exist. And I know when Megan has been out on the property, she's found even more invasive species by type than I had identified. But we have large areas of Japanese knotweed, large areas of Oriental bittersweet. We've got rugosa rose. We have all types of invasives that have wanted to colonize the disturbed areas of the site. And let's flip to the next slide there, Shannon. When we get through with this development, what is going to have happened is that the invasives in many of these areas will be removed by some of the site construction. Along the river's edge, however, we have Oriental bittersweet that is colonized much of the existing tree mass along the entire river's edge. We're going to have to cut that out. And then we have the large areas, particularly on the west of the Japanese knotweed, right in this area. The areas that are blue in that area are Japanese knotweed, and that's going to require some relatively continual maintenance. We've seen people be successful with the Japanese knotweed with cutting over a period of time, but it perhaps even the use of some chemical retardants to kill the knotweed. It is very, very difficult. At this point, I am not proposing the disturbance of the embankment in the area immediately on the screen here, that is sort of the eastern half of the site that runs from the bike trail down to the river. That area is colonized in part by by briars, some the wild rose, and perhaps even some of the bittersweet. Now, the bittersweet is killing the trees in this area, so we've got to cut that out. But I'm concerned about going too far down the bank, and the bank is stable at this point, and we just may leave that area along the very edge of the bank as colonized by some of these invasives, for fear of touching the area too much. So one of the issues we have to address is invasive species as we move forward. And I think I'd be certainly looking forward to any comments that commission members and/or the town staff might have in that regard. We have seen that, for example, in moving topsoil, that if there's any Japanese knotweed in the topsoil, that will spring up in a different location. So dealing with that particular plant is a concern, and I wouldn't mind some guidance or some thoughts on that as we move forward. Shannon, could we step back and go to the L, perhaps 4 and 4.1? Way back. The plan that was that existing condition plan might be helpful, just that you had there a second ago. It might be the L2. Yes, go to that plan you just had up. Yes, thank you. I don't know if you can see this clearly, but there's when the plans are printed, they're much more easy to read, but there is a light tone. It's supposed to be a tan tone shown on these plans. And those areas, I had pointed out to you a few minutes ago, the line of the poorly drained soils that Megan had identified along the river. But when we talk about alluvial soils, it is these tan areas that sit in between the sewer lines that on the property that are the alluvial soils that Megan has identified on the property. The white areas in between are not. But these areas are, and when you total those up, there's about 5.2 acres of alluvial soils on the property. We have about 2.15 or so acres of poorly drained soils that are down by the river. Now, Shannon, if we could take and go to the, I think it's the 4.1, L4.1. One of the next 2 or 3 slides, smaller scale master plan sheet. That it might be the next one. Try the next one. Yes. As we were in discussions with the town staff during a review, it was requested that we consider showing the bicycle path connection into the town park. We have been aware, I'm sure everyone is aware, there is a municipal park immediately to the west of the railroad embankment that extends another 2,000 feet or so up the Farmington River towards the west. And the plan of conservation and development shows a bike path connection going east onto the property that we're proposing to develop, and also west into the town park. And we agreed that we would show the design for the bike path connection into the parking lot area, the existing parking lot area for the town park. And as part of that, Megan went onto the town property and looked for wetland soils that might be anywhere near the proposal, and identified that slightly tan area that's on the plans as an area of alluvial soils, and we would have an impact on that right at the top of that, right in there. There's probably 1,000 square feet or 1,300 square feet. It's on the data table. I don't remember off the top of my head. I should, but I don't. Where we would be taking the bike path through at that point to gain access to the parking lot. And perhaps Shannon, we could go back to that color rendering.
Which color? The site, this one?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, okay.
And this kind of just generally, I'm about to just sum up, and I'll turn it over to Tom. But what I've tried to do is give you an overall picture of what the proposal would encompass. We've tried to pull ourselves back. The original master plan that we talked about for a few minutes actually had 4 of our buildings within the upland review area. By the straightening of the sewer line, we've reduced that impact. So we've tried to pull ourselves back as far as we could. There'll be no paving or parking within any of the upland review areas. It's basically roof water and some paths, that type of thing, and predominantly the bike path as it would run through. And I think with that, I'd like to step back and let Tom get into the detail of how he's handling the erosion and sediment control and the storm drainage. And then we'd like to go to Megan to get into the details of the soils and the impact analysis.
Thank you, Phil. It's for the record is Tom Daly with SLR. Shannon, could I trouble you to put the, I believe it's an L2 sheet, which is the existing conditions? Great. So good evening, Commission. So we have taken a very close look at this site, and I think if the Commission takes a site visit, you'll see that it's, as Phil indicated, it's relatively flat. There's a lot of undulation on the site. There is some steep topography adjacent to the river, but in the area where we're developing, it's very flat and on site. And if you make a site visit, you'll kind of scratch your head and say, well, where is the water from this site actually discharge? And it's our belief and our investigation that actually water doesn't discharge from this site due to the excellent underlying soils and the underlying topography. It's our professional opinion that virtually all the water does just simply infiltrate into the site, and except for maybe under some extreme conditions. Today, there's, as Phil indicated, the far upper left corner of this map, there's a developed portion of the site, the McAllen building. The McAllen building has a single point discharge that is a 24-inch pipe. That discharge is about 130 feet. There it is. Yeah, thank you, Shannon. There's a single discharge point that goes to kind of a level spreader slash riprap basin. The ultimate discharge of that point is about 130 feet from the Farmington River and about 125 feet from the wetland edge. So still naturally providing a pretty nice infiltration buffer from that pipe over. The one additional drainage discharge on this site is, as you know, there's a pond directly adjacent on the north side of Route 4. There is a 24-inch pipe that runs across the site. It's essentially, we believe, to be a high-level overflow from the pond. And that discharges straight down through the middle of the site through an easement. And once again, that end of the pipe is about, if you measure kind of diagonal there, it's about 125 to 130 feet from the wetland edge and Farmington River. Actually, Shannon, it's a little closer to the corner over there, even though the water, there you go, right there. So under existing conditions, there is two pipe discharges, but as I indicated, this pipe actually is not draining the site itself. It's actually draining this site across the site. As part of our investigation, we did 32 test pits across the site and found no groundwater, found no ledge, and found that basically the entire site was good sand and gravel. So once again, it really points to the fact that that we really have a site that's well productive in its terms of infiltration from the site. As Phil indicated, there's also the one major utility that is going through the site is a 30-inch diameter sewer main. It goes from the left on where the trail is and goes right through the middle of the site. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not an engineer's dream for alignment, but that's what it got put in as, and that is through the site. Otherwise, basically, those are the items on the site. Shannon, if we can go to, I believe it's the UT sheet. So as Shannon's getting that sheet, obviously we worked very hard to mimic the existing drainage patterns, and that drainage pattern is basically promote infiltration. And as we went through the master plan approvals through zoning, we also received, as Phil indicated, this is in the aquifer protection area, just off plan And to the right is the wellhead for the water company. We received comments from the water company during master plan approval. And also we've done other projects in the area and knew what they were looking for. And so we worked hard to mimic that existing conditions where we wanted to promote infiltration to the highest extent possible. And we really did achieve that by two different ways. One, and these mimic the recommendations from the water company. First of all, we took the buildings and we took those to underground chambers. Building water is essentially clean, it's just coming off the roof. And we put those into underground chambers. And I believe we have 11 of those systems located throughout the site. And then we have the other major drainage system on the site is we have 6 infiltration basins, and these are scattered throughout the site. They are infiltration basins and they include sediment forebays prior to the discharge. And they also have, prior to each sediment basin, we have a hydrodynamic separator to provide additional water quality before it gets to the basin. So as in addition to the sediment forebays, these basins also have infiltration trenches to further promote infiltration. We were able to use those on a project just a couple parcels over, and they worked very well. So thank you, Shannon, as you're bringing that up.
I forgot they were a separate file.
Oh, sorry about that. So maybe the previous sheet, Shannon, it's the overall utility plan.
Certainly.
There you go. So once again, so we're using this combination. Many of the pavement areas are actually just sheet flowing. They have a leak off that go into a gravel trench and down into the basin. So we're using low impact development. There is areas that we will have to pipe, but there's many areas we're just sheet flowing off into these basins. But I think we've really covered the site equally. They're not concentrated in one area, they're kind of spread out throughout. And we also did calculations that we showed each basin has enough storage even for the 100-year storm. And that's taking credit for only 50% of the infiltration rates as recommended by the DEP. We basically cut them in half to have a factor of safety of 2. We do have really 3 drainage structures that are adjacent or on the area closer to the river. Shin, if you zoom in by the McAllen building down there, or down that discharge in the lower left-hand corner. There you go. So in the same location where the old McAllen discharge was that I explained, we've created a infiltration basin. This basin actually has no formal discharge. It has an emergency overflow, but we are going to abandon the McAllen discharge pipe that we talked about, and we'll be discharging it into this basin. This basin will also take drainage associated with the bike trail located on the left that is being taken down. And that, as I said, no point discharge in that location. So Shannon, if you can scroll to the middle of the site. So this is really the only pipe discharge we have in this going towards the river, but we have located it 120 feet and actually is located directly adjacent to the 24-inch pipe that's coming from the pond. And this is really just a high level overflow. All the area to the right of this discharge is very steep slope, and we did not want to intercept that or did not want to mess with that on the right-hand side. So we had to bring a high level overflow around these 2 buildings and have a discharge. But even that, we've created a biodepression at the end of the discharge. So essentially we don't expect any water to really make it to the river except under extreme conditions. But as I said, we tried to pick the same location where the other 24-inch pipe is and not have a new discharge point. So it's approximately that discharge location is approximately 120 feet from the wetlands and the river's edge. In terms of erosion control, we have put together a erosion control plan as part of this application. The site is, as I said, relatively flat, good sand and gravels, we should not get a lot of discharge, but we clearly have a wetland resource, the Farmington River, which is very important to protect. And so we have perimeter controls along the trail, but upgrading of that, we have a diversion berm and a sediment trap system that will basically capture all construction runoff before it gets even to the trail. And all those diversion berms will send this water into these sediment traps and hold that on site. I would point out to this commission that we are not using any of the sediment basins, the permanent sediment basins, as sediment traps. We were able to locate these sediment traps as an independent thing, but we didn't want to send construction runoff to there, which would ultimately could have some negative impacts on the infiltration of those as we move forward. This site has very few steep slopes. The only steep slope that we really had to focus on is, as Phil indicated, we're reconstructing the entire trail system on the left-hand side of the site. We're ramping down steeply from the trail system. So that was one area that had some steep slopes, and we are going to protect that with an erosion control blanket and some check dams throughout there, because that's something we do have to focus on. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd like to turn it over to Megan Raymond to present on the wetlands. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tom. My name's Megan Raymond. I'm a professional wetland scientist and registered soil scientist, principal scientist here at SLR and Wetlands and Waterways lead. I'm also a certified floodplain manager. And I became involved with the site in January of 2019, and it began by flagging wetlands on the property. As you've heard, we have about 1,800 linear feet of frontage on the Farmington River. Shannon, I'm just trying to figure out what the best figure for me is right now. I don't know. Sure, we could use this. I don't suppose you have, and I apologize for burdening you, but I don't suppose you have our existing conditions ecological communities map, perhaps. Either way, I could just do the EX plan is fine. The one you just had at the rendering is perfectly fine. We have some figures in the back of that report.
So you're referring to your report, Megan?
Yeah, sorry, but I can just use the EX plan that Tom began with. That's fine for me too.
Okay.
That's easy enough, and we can get into the to other things later. So just the existing conditions. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I do have your report if you want it.
Okay, maybe we'll get into that after I give a little overview. And yeah, thanks for having us this evening as well, and entertaining us virtually as well as your in-person staff. So the site's 24.85 acres. It's oriented east-west here that we're looking at, with Farmington River to the south, about 1,800 linear feet of frontage on the river. As you've heard, the site has undergone quite a bit of disturbance in the 20th century. We included some aerial photos from 1951 in the report, as well as I think in 1990. And it's sort of interesting looking at the modifications along the river over that time, where in 51 it showed a pretty clear little oxbow channel down on the southern end of the site, and that was excavated for sand and gravel, obviously, and it's resulted in a channel or an appearance of the river as it exists on the site of almost an embayment or a small pond. It doesn't look like a riverine environment. It's quite still water. An average width of the river in here is about 600 feet or so, 650 feet, where we have an average channel width up gradient of about 200. So we're looking at about a channel about 3 times as wide. The other interesting thing to note is just with the earth moving activities, the degree of manipulation along the edge of the river. We have these topographic highs up to about elevation 206 is our high point at the river, and these mounds of fill that exist along the riverbank. And what that has done is it's modified the wetland boundary around the river to be essentially along the ordinary high water line in the eastern portion of the site. And then as we move to the west, there's not as much fill material right along the river, and the wetland broadens to about 100 feet, 125 feet or so, and then it heads right up to that to the railway embankment that is now the Farmington Canal Trail. The Farmington Canal Trail in and of itself has done some interesting effect on the hydraulics of the site as it relates to the floodplain. As you've heard, we have a base flood elevation here, 100-year floodplain elevation of approximately 175 feet. Immediately up gradient of that canal, we have a base flood elevation on your ball field site of 182. We see a 7-foot drop in flood stage as it relates to the embankment of the railway, which is essentially effectively a levee that exists and imposes some modifications to flow dynamics on this property. So what we're looking at is a site that has macro scale modifications from this levee that exists or railway embankment that exists off-site to the west, as well as micro scale modifications with the earth moving activity, the degree of fill around the property, as well as you've heard, the existing sewer lines that crisscross the property. We did go through the site and we walked it pretty carefully when we first delineated it back in January 2019. And our thoughts and understandings of this site has definitely been refined since that time as it relates to the alluvial soils. As we've described, we have this 1,800-foot linear system along the Farmington River, and that's comprised of a palustrine forested. There's components of forest in that area, floodplain forest, particularly in the west. We have some scrub shrub wetlands within that area and a small area of emergent wetlands in the central portion of the wetland on the river. We also have some Occam sandy loam soils, some alluvial soils that exist in the interior of the site. Those occupy about 5 acres of land on the property interior. When we first started looking at that site, we were considering those areas, those 5 acres of alluvial soils as potentially regulated through the Connecticut Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Act under the poorly drained, very poorly drained alluvial and floodplain soil provision. But as we've gotten to know the site in communication with both DEEP and fellow soil scientists as it relates to the applicability of the Connecticut Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Act to relic alluvial soils that are no longer supported by active alluvial processes in a floodplain, we have since refined the regulatory implications of those alluvial soils to determine that those areas would not be regulated under the Connecticut Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Act because they are no longer alluvial soils in an active sense. The capacity for these areas to be actively flooded is impeded both by site-specific fill as well as macro scale modification with the railway, and therefore there's no implications of regulatory implications as it relates to inland wetland conditions on the site. From an alluvial perspective. And that understanding is also refined by the vegetative composition of these areas. We see an upland community within those portions of the site, definitively oak forest. There's absolutely no wetland functionality provided by those areas. They exist within upland conditions. They're non-hydric soils. And in that regard, our understanding and our appreciation of this as it relates to, again, regulation has been refined and a little bit modified from when we first began to speak with you about this back in November. And I'm sure certainly there's probably questions on this, which I'm happy to get into as we get into our presentation this evening, or as we conclude the presentation and go on to our back and forth with you all later on tonight. But again, we took a look at the site I think it's really important to define, and this is one of the most important parts of the project, is really laying out these existing conditions, because from there we can evaluate impacts and ensure that we have a site that really protects our high quality resource, which is the Farmington River. And that was always the intent of the project, was to design a development that allowed for maintenance of the high quality resource of the Farmington River. You've heard how we've done that with stormwater management and sedimentation and erosion control, but I think there's also another point of this project that, as it relates to the addition of the trail on the site and the introduction of visual access to the river to the public. That really increases the value of the wetland, the Farmington River wetland as it relates to public use. Encouraging and appreciating and enhancing and kind of allowing for opportunities with the public to have active engagement with wetland resources strengthens community ties to wetlands. It allows for an understanding and appreciation of these resources and kind of as us pull together as a collective community to design projects that really protect those areas. And I think that that is certainly the intent of the project and what we've tried to do with our design drawings. So the existing conditions are wetland resources along the river. We did also map our vegetative communities in the interior with the relic alluvial oak forest. We have a successional shrub areas that are patterned around the site, primarily dominated by non-native vegetation. We have some areas of mowed lawn with trees, kind of in that stormwater area by the McAllen building. We have a little bit of pavement and urban structure with a little keyholes development that exists in the western portion of the site. And then we have a lot of woodland edge that exists around the perimeter. And there are 6 upland communities that we've mapped out and categorized and inventoried the vegetation. Those lists are included in the report, as well as the 3 wetland communities, which are again the palustrine emergent, scrub, shrub, and forested wetlands that exist along the river. One of the things that I'd just like to point out is I think the use of and actually it was an important mandate from your Planning and Zoning Commission as it relates to no direct wetland discharges or no new discharges to stormwater. We have these great soils that allow for infiltration, and we've been able to design a site plan that has really dispersed stormwater management systems that allow for the direct infiltration or infiltration after water quality measures very close to the points of interception of stormwater. And that's lending to a kind of a dispersed and fragmented stormwater management plan that's going to only enhance and maintain those interests of the Farmington River. I'm just looking at my notes, making sure that I've gotten everything. I think that, yeah, just again with housekeeping, the wetland that exists along the Farmington is about 2.5 acres, 2.5 acres in size, about 10% of the site. The work within the upland review is relatively confined to with a majority of the activities related to the trail, which obviously is enhancing that wetland value with the visual access. We tried to minimize the infrastructure within the upland review to the rivers to the greatest extent practicable. And in total, we're looking at a plan that maintains the functionality of the wetland. And as it relates to if we want to get into the alluvial soils and relic alluvial discussion, I'd just like to point out that discussion and that analysis and that kind of housekeeping as it relates to the alluvial designation is truly just that. It's almost arithmetic. These interpretations did not change the site design, did not modify the site plan. It's a factor of kind of arithmetic and record keeping. And from our perspective, there's no regulatory implications of the relic alluvial on the site. Let me just close by looking at the proposed conditions briefly with you, just to make sure that we've got all the areas identified. I think you can look at the utility plan. That's perfect. So I think we can see from this plan the real clustering or the concentration of the building and infrastructure as it exists along Farmington Avenue, and then an opening and a green space with the trail kind of bisecting that along the river. So we've tried to really concentrate our uses with the intensity of use up by the road and where it exists and feathers into the existing development, and then allow a nice green space and an open space area to the south of the site. That's a perfect illustration. Thanks a lot for that, Shannon. So, and just again, and just to summarize with the alluvial specifically, when we move to the west and you're getting onto your town park, that is a 1,300 square foot area of impact that we have some fill slope along the toe of the canal embankment. But then as we're getting into your ball field property, there is 1,300 square feet of direct wetland impact there, and that is active alluvial. That area is within the floodplain. We do have active alluvial soils in that location, so that would be a direct wetland impact in that one spot of about 1,300 square feet. I think I'd like to, at this point, just close for now. I'm happy to answer questions, but I think I'd like to turn it to Robin to summarize our team's presentation this evening. Thanks so much, and appreciate your time tonight.
So we've presented a fair amount of information to you. We've pointed out the changes from the plan at the informal as we presented it to you back in December of 2020. And we would, at this point, entertain any questions that you have. I think clearly Megan has made the case for the disturbances of the alluvial soils in the mid part of the site, and she has underscored how limited our work of direct impact within the upland review area is. I think it's fair to say a great deal of attention has been paid to groundwater recharging and elimination of the aggressive non-native flora that has invaded this site, and the opportunities for enhancing public use of this site over the bike trail are all positives with regard to the worthiness of approving this plan for development as we've been able to show you this evening. I really have nothing more to add at this point. I think it's just a good time for us to see what questions you have or additional information that you might need to be able to begin your consideration of this proposal.
Rich, I guess I'll go ahead and throw it to you for any questions or comments you may have.
I have a couple of questions, but they're not wetland related, so I will pass on those. That's all I have.
Rich, do you need anything answered from a clarification standpoint?
It's really not wetlands, and
Okay, that's fine.
it's just, you know, you're going to have this bike path through here, and they're proposing it as public access, but I don't, it's on private property, so I don't know how the public access is being guaranteed in the future. So that's my only question, and it's not wetland related.
All right, thanks, Rich. Dave?
Yeah, I was wondering about the relict alluvial issue. I think, Megan, you mentioned some conversations with DEEP. Have they provided guidance and confirmed your designation as non-regulated?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. I did email a contact at DEEP about this, and they affirmed my position or our position rather, that the relict alluvial are not regulated. And I'd be happy to, we can get into how we want to formalize that. It's interesting in Connecticut, in contrast to other states, and with even the Army Corps of Engineers, there are opportunities that, to do, resource area determination requests and things. We don't have that. We don't have a process for that in the state. It's a little bit more informal. But this site would be one that you could see digging into it, because it's unique, right? There's not too many sites that have these upland alluvial soils that are not in an active floodplain. And it's because of the modifications that we've described with the railway, as well as the fill on the site and the earthwork through the years. But again, there's no potential for the site to ever resurrect its ability to be a deposition area for alluvium because of these intense modifications, particularly the railway. You know, you could liken it to a poorly drained soil that in some senses, in some areas, those are determined to be unregulated. In other areas, in some situations, everything is like, I guess what I'm getting at is it's situational with some of these modified sites, modified and manipulated sites. It needs to be a situational application. So that the long, this is a long answer to your simple question, which is yes, and they did affirm our position. And again, it's for all of the reasons that we've described from a macro scale and micro scale perspective.
Yeah, I get your point, but
yeah,
the statute and the regulations don't say that. I guess it would be good to have, you know, something in writing confirming that we don't have jurisdiction here.
Sure. We can provide that. And we'll provide, I mean, we can provide the communication that we have. And I believe that your town staff may have reached out to another staff person at DEEP, who was not the one that I spoke with on this, issue. Actually, it was just
again,
email.
Perhaps tomorrow we can exchange information, because I did reach out to Darcy Winther, who is the liaison to all the town inland wetland agencies. And so that's my go-to.
Sure.
I understand you spoke to someone else, but it'd be helpful to make sure that connection is made, so that as I hear back from Darcy, it's there's some consistency in the dialogue that's taking place. So it'd be helpful to share that with Darcy, so that it just closes that loop for her from an information standpoint.
And that's perfect. And again, you know, we're not trying to, you know, we're really not trying to change. I mean, we're not trying to pull one over or anything along those lines. This has been something that we've been thinking about and looking at it from a scientific, from a regulatory, from all of these perspectives, in order to present the most appropriate project for you to deliberate on. And again, as it relates to that particular issue, we're not, these discussions do not affect the important resource that we're protecting in the Farmington River. This is truly, this is not a wetland functionality discussion. It is an arithmetic, or, you know, kind of a discussion, I guess, at this point, because of these modifications to the flow dynamics on the site that disallow this active alluvial process for which the regulations were intended. I can bore you with my hypothesis on the Oxford comma tomorrow too, Shannon, which I think would have cleared this up when this regulation was written. But anyway,
that's the second time in about a month that I've had an Oxford comma situation. So
I really understand, you know, the lack of resource value. It's more of an arithmetic thing, as you said.
Yes.
I'd been thinking about that this afternoon, and I remembered quite a long time ago in reviewing the Adrian's Landing project in Hartford. There was a lot of alluvial soils on that site, but that was separated from the river by a dike, and it was also buried under 10 feet of fill. And DEEP at that point said that was not a regulated area. But I think the 10 feet of fill was really factored into that decision too. So moving on, I had just had a quick question about the climbing up to the bike trail. You're going to be lowering the bike trail by a significant amount. I was just curious as to how long it's going to be out of commission.
Phil Doyle, I'll answer that. You can see a note down in the left-hand corner of this plan. We had used this plan for discussions with the planning staff, and there's about 810 feet of the existing bike trail that's going to be disrupted. And I think we might have talked about this or touched on this in December. there's really two ways to think about bike trail connections when the existing bike trail is 30 feet higher, this remnant railroad bed than your site. You can either build a ramp that's an abutment where you'd bring in fill and attach it to the bike trail, or you can lower the bike trail. And with the distance, with that height distance of 30 feet, to run a continuous ramp down at a reasonable grade, and my feeling on a reasonable grade is trying to maintain about a 5% pitch, as opposed to doing something more extreme, which might be a 10% pitch. We need about 600 feet of distance. And at 600 feet of distance, just common sense, when you take a look at that area that we've colored in blue, light blue, along the western side, the left-hand side of this picture, 600 feet would take most of that area from about where Shannon has the cursor now, where those trees would remain, down at least to probably to almost to that point, back a little bit, maybe Shannon, but somewhere in there. And part of what would happen would be that you would have to extend this abutment into and around the McCallum building. That abutment would have to extend out quite considerably because you're starting from 30 feet up. And if you have a one-on-one slope, you're extending out at least 30 feet. If you want to have a more gradual slope, a 2-on-1, you'd be out something like 60 feet or so. So after considering this for a number of months, we looked at the option of lowering the trail and starting a vertical curve on both abutments, both on the Route 4 abutment and on the river abutment, and dropping it about 5%, and then going into a sag curve right at the bottom. And in doing that, we're able to go from about a 210 elevation at the existing trail level now, down to about a 196. And the discussion, and because the town manages the trail, the right of way is actually owned by the DOT. Bruce Sear from the town staff has been our liaison with the state, and the state has thought that this was a reasonable solution. So the part of the planning for this has been, we're going to have to take the trail out of action, probably want to do it during the colder months of the year, because there are some months where the trail is not maintained. Certainly when snow happens, the trails aren't plowed, but there are fewer and fewer people using the trail during the colder months of the year. So that's probably when that would happen. And my expectation is this is a 3, 4, 5 month process to fully accomplish, because we have to take the material down, we have to grade it, we have to build our ramps down and put in the appropriate drainage. As Tom mentioned, there'd be some amount of drainage that we would be putting in. Then we have to come back in and we have to stabilize the slopes and repave, and we're not going to be able to repave until the plants are open. So if that happens March, beginning of April, we might be starting something like this in the end of October, and it might run through until paving season opens in April. But it's going to be something on that order, and what the trail will be shut down some considerable distance north and south. There's that trail parking area to the north up on Brickyard, and then down on Red Oak Road, I think it is, to the south, both about 0.8 of a mile. For all practical purposes, you're not going to be biking in that area. You won't be able to cross the river. You can cross the river, but you'd hit a dead end. So the warning signs, all of that is going to have to be part of the part of the process. There's a whole set of plans that have to be put together specifically for that purpose. The other thing I could mention is there was a question, and I'm not sure which gentleman asked the question about how the access might work. This is going to be something, the access to the trail. The trail is basically an extension of the bike trail, be managed by the town of Farmington, but there'll be a permanent easement that will be granted for the bike trail as it crosses through the property. I think similar to what the easements that are generated when we build sidewalks across streets, but there might not, or along streets where there might not be enough right of way. The attorneys write easements for those sidewalks. There would be a permanent easement associated with public access for the bike trail.
Thank you. I don't have anything else at this time.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Robert? Is Robert there? You muted?
Yeah, I was having a lovely conversation with myself. Apologize for being on mute. I'll just reiterate that I think it would be useful to have Megan and Shannon share notes on discussions with DEEP regarding the relic alluvial soils, because it does have a substantive effect on our regulatory authority. Overall, I think the plan represents a lot of care in development, and it sort of strikes that balance, recognizing where this agency has regulatory jurisdiction, the placement of the buildings, really at the fringe of the 150-foot regulated area is appreciated. The presentation did identify there still is a fair amount of activity within the regulated area for this commission. So I think the overall activity proposed by the development will likely be significant. The inclusion of the bike path, I think, is good. I'd be interested to know what the design of the bike path is going to be. Is it going to be traditional construction, or is there going to be any environmentally friendly materials used for the bike path itself? With regard to the placement of the dock, I think it is a good inclusion. As the presentation covered, it will help minimize the impact to the riverbank for people ad hoc putting in and taking out their watercraft. And that is going to conclude my comments and questions. So no questions, they were all just comments.
Thanks, Robert. Mark?
Mark had sent a message since he can hear us fine, but he's having difficulty with his audio from a communication. He says no questions at this time due to my lack of communication. So I said he's been able to hear everything. He's just, for whatever reason, his audio back to us is challenging this evening.
All right, thanks. Ned?
Yeah, I'm looking at the lowering of the bike ramp and the U-turn that's put in to go to the ballpark side. And I'm looking at this, Shannon, can you bring up L 4.1, please? So, oh, is that 4.1? Let me see. Yeah, okay. So I see that on the other side, on the development side, you've got your sidewalk is coming down, and then you want to merge with a sidewalk that's an offshoot of it at basically 183.43. I was just wondering if that was really important, because I'm thinking maybe you don't need to lower this so much, because if you just had one ramp that came off on the development side to put it on a wall, carried it down a little farther. And then why can't you just have it go to that first turn and then have an area because I fish there all the time, and the abutment and the wing walls, if you just had an offshoot there and tied it into, there's an existing dirt road instead of building this big U-shaped thing. I mean, these things, if you gave yourself more room, a longer ramp, that maybe you wouldn't have to cut down the grade, cut down the grade of the bikeway as much and giving yourself more room to come down. I don't know. I'm just wondering if anybody investigated that, and because there's already a path there that goes cuts in front of the abutment, and then it ties into a dirt road. So, I mean, seems like that would be a lot simpler if we could just make this a longer ramp on this side and then have the offshoot to the ballparks at the abutment to the railroad bridge. And then you would lose that connection at 183.43, but that would be a retaining wall with the ramp on top of it, and then you'd come down to the rest of your grade here and tie into your development, I don't know, somewhere else. But it'd be nice to not have to lower this as much, and it would be nice not to have this big U thing, and then we wouldn't have to cut through the alluvial soils that are highlighted in yellow, and it just seems like a simpler plan. I'm just wondering if anybody considered that.
Bill?
Yeah, this is Phil. I better say I'm not exactly sure how to answer, because I'm trying to wrap my head around the question. Shannon, could you kind of just make this a little bit smaller so that we can see the whole area in context? Yeah, and it's, yeah, somewhere like, let's just stop there. Make it a little bit bigger. You were perfect a second ago. I guess part of the answer is, as this project evolved, going back now 4 years, we've been working on it for a long time. The goal had been to develop the bike path connection primarily to run from the trail towards the village of Farmington to the east. And the focus in the town master plan was for a subsidiary connection to the ballpark. That was a secondary consideration. The primary focus was to take people from this north-south tending trail running to the east. So as we were speaking with the town planners at that point, everyone's focus was on the connection on the east side. Now, I started out my presentation earlier talking about the zoning, because many times zoning in ways has impact on the design, and then that has a subsequent impact on inland wetlands. And the part of the direction of the zoning move was to rehabilitate, allow for the easier rehabilitation of the McCallum building, providing more people, more activity happening on that property. And the idea was to extend the bicycle path connection into the McCallum building, so people riding along the trail could come down a ramp and then go directly into McCallum. Hopefully there might be some restaurants or other activities happening there that would encourage presence to make that building more occupied than it has been for almost 100 years. So there were a number of decisions that pushed us towards having the connection on the eastern side as opposed to the western side. And it wasn't until relatively recently when the town staff had said, could we show on the plans this secondary connection into the town ball field, that we did so. And you had mentioned the kind of the U-shaped form. That form, just so that people understand why that design evolved, is that when people come down on the bike path and we lower this area down, that diamond shape that the cursor sort of running around will be widening the trail in there and painting that area out, because that will become an intersection. And you don't want people cruising too fast down into the town park on the bike trail. So what we were proposing to do at that point was to purposely create a loop that would force people to ride their bikes slowly around a curve, and then they'd be down on the flat, so that they wouldn't be blowing past some of these rather intense bicycle riders. Don't have the greatest sense of personal space, and families with kids sometimes get run over by some of these guys, some of these hotshots. So we were purposely trying to slow people down, and that's the rationale. That's how we evolved the plan. Yes, there is a dirt trail down there. We're trying to stay away from that. We're trying not to extend ourselves close to the river. My feeling had been the closer we come in a number of instances to the river, the more likely we are to cause problems. I'd like to stay as far away as possible. And where we have located the bike path on the eastern side, we have tried to place that on an existing path, dirt path that's in that area. I'm not looking to cut new paths. I don't want to become an explorer, tearing up areas that are not currently torn up. So that's kind of our rationale.
If I may offer another element to that, given that this is now going to be when it is complete, there is, Mr. Doyle noted, there'll be an easement to the town, and we'll be responsible for the maintenance of this. And given that there is a propensity for this area to flood, we have seen it underwater more than once. The concern was the erosion of the trail and the base in that particular area, and the need to routinely maintain, repair, replace it in this location. With the floodplain elevation changing at that, it can be quite turbulent in this area, particularly during times of flood, hurricane, etc. Certainly there are staff members here at town that have seen that more than I have. I believe too, the sewer line comes through. Of course, the sewer line's buried, but we have manholes through here. And I also believe there is a fiber optic cable that comes through here. I think we had a permit. They had to rebury the fiber optic cable, but there's a few things going on here that didn't necessarily make it ideal. And it's not, they'd have to create a level area in order to really appropriately accommodate a trail wide enough and be offset from the abutment enough to accommodate bicyclists and passing traffic, if you will. So
isn't the entire bike trail adjacent to the river within the floodplain? Topographic FEMA flood limit. The whole bike trail is in there.
Correct, but it's not immediately adjacent to the floodway and adjacent to the abutments where there's an increase in turbulence. And so the velocity and erosive factor here is drastically different than the velocity and erosive factors that we're going to see here inland through this wetland system. when you get to this portion of the plan, the trail actually is above the floodplain limit. So the floodplain line comes down here, it follows the 175 contour level, and this trail actually is above the floodplain. So there's this portion of the trail is below the floodplain elevation. I don't know what the elevation, I'd have to zoom in back and forth on this plan. But certainly
Okay, yeah, I see.
the velocity experience here in the concern, can it happen over here? Sure. I'm not saying that we can't have an issue where there's the flood is so serious where we're now having to maintain and fix portions of this trail. I guess the point was that coming around this abutment was going to increase the opportunity and perhaps frequencies of repairs to the trail that were going to be needed. And we're trying to minimize that, given that the town of Farmington is going to be responsible for the long-term maintenance of this trail.
Okay, yeah, I see. So when you are at flood level, then the abutment and wing walls become a constriction and speed up the velocity of the water. Okay, all right. So on the new buildings, are they all residential units, or are they going to be like, mixed use?
The new buildings are all going to be residential. Shannon could point out where there's a community clubhouse. That is a community clubhouse. Any of the buildings that are fronting on the river that would be within the upland review area, those are all residential. The McCallum buildings will stay commercial, though there will be apartments in the taller building, the masonry building. And there are two buildings that front on Farmington Avenue. Those would be commercial. Those are remote from the river.
Yeah, the auto repair. Now, is this a new commercial building that's
Which one?
Yeah, right in there. So you have the auto parts place, or not the auto part, the repair facility, oil change repair facility. Yeah, that one, and then next to it, that's going to be a new commercial building.
Yes, currently a house on that property now, and
Okay.
Eventually that house that's a rental will come down, and there will be a new professional office building, 5,000 square feet or so on that property.
Okay. And of the units that are 20 or 25 units, how many stories are those?
Those buildings are 3 stories tall.
Okay. All right. It's a very interesting development, and I mean, this is I don't know, this is a well-used area of the river, and I do have concerns. I know a lot of people fish around here, and so I don't want them to lose that access to I don't know, but I think it can be done in harmony. So, okay, that's all I have for questions.
Okay, thanks, Ned. I do have some questions, and I'm not going to get into the layout or anything along those lines. I'm sticking with the wetlands. This relic alluvial soils that you're referring to, Megan, is there anything in the Connecticut general statutes stating anything about this?
There's not.
Okay, no, that's the answer. Is there anything in the Farmington wetland regulations allowing for this type of interpretation?
Nope, that pretty much mirrors the CGS, the 22A.
Is there any case law that backs up your interpretation?
We were actually discussing that today, and we do not have a case law for you.
Okay, so basically, alluvial soils are alluvial soils are alluvial soils. I mean, it may not be directly connected to the river anymore, but based on the statutory and regulatory definition, that's still an alluvial soil. So that's one thing. And Shannon, can you go into the map, maybe a little more detail? So enlarge it some. So I want to be able to see where the wetland delineated line is and where the floodplain line is.
Okay. Do you want it on this map or is it,
If it's on this map, that's fine. I'm just trying to compare where the wetland delineation is and where the 100-year flood elevation is.
yep,
That-
here.
And that's probably best on one of these maps, Shannon, because I think we have a lot of good mapping in our impact assessment, but we don't, I'm not sure the flood zone is on. Yeah, this is a good one.
Yep.
Okay, so if you can blow that up a little bit, please.
Yep, and we can
Yep.
walk through it.
Okay, so
So this dark,
my understanding,
that's the floodplain line.
yeah,
Here.
so my understanding
Correct.
of wetlands is poorly drained, very poorly drained alluvial and floodplain soils.
Right. And so
So
I-
where you have the 100-year flood elevation,
right.
is that not floodplain soil?
It is not. That is eudorthant there. There's a lot of fill material throughout the site, a lot of HTM, human transported material. That is not floodplain soil in that location.
Okay, I'm having a hard time with that one. I mean, again, because where I'm kind of going with this is, I mean, I agree with Robert in the sense that I don't have so much an issue with the project the way that it's laid out. I think there was a lot of thought that went into it.
Mm-hmm.
However, based on what you're saying, if I was opposed to this project, to me, you gave me 2 ways in to appeal any approval on this project, because we're obligated to follow what the definition of a wetland is. And you can argue it all you want, but that's not going to be something I think that we're going to necessarily make a specific clarification on, because I think we need to use the language that is either in the statutes, in the regulations, and supported by case law. So my take would be, I think the project is large enough that it most likely, to me, I would be looking to have a public hearing on this, saying this is a significant activity, and then let you present your information at the public hearing. That may be perfectly fine, but I think at this point in time, you're jumping the gun in terms of what we do or do not regulate. You may have, some other people at Deep that you've spoken with. But again, based on the definitions in the statutes and our regs, alluvial soils are still alluvial soils. I understand what you're saying, but you're trying to put this fine point on it, but it's still an alluvial soil, no matter how you call it. Whether it's the relic alluvial soil, it's still an alluvial soil. There's nothing in the statutes, there's nothing in the regulations, and as you said, you don't think there's anything in case law which allows us to say, nope, we're not going to consider that.
I guess but the thing is that there are preambles to regulations that kind of give the background of the regulatory intent. And when you look at that language, the fact that it's truly this active alluvial process and floodplain process, that was the regulatory intent. I certainly see what you're saying. And it's not as though we're putting a fine point on it. It's more that we've refined our understanding through correspondence and communication with other soil scientists and with a person up at Deep. Again, we're happy. That's the interpretation and the report that we wrote. So that we could just leave it at that right now. I mean, we could certainly, refine these calculations of impact to account for these, which is how we presented this individually. And again, we're trying to.
But there's nothing in the statutes and nothing in the regulations that start going through these mathematical equations that you're talking about. It's strictly whether it's poorly drained, very poorly drained, alluvial or floodplain soil. That's fairly basic. You're trying to put a finer point on what you found at the site. All I'm trying to get at is what we're supposed to be regulating is poorly drained, very poorly drained, alluvial and floodplain soils. So all I'm saying is, for me, because of the alluvial soils on the property, I would be leaning towards saying this could have a significant impact, and I would be looking at going a public hearing route, just to be on the safe side. That's all I'm saying on this. And that you can turn around in the information that you're presenting. I'm not trying to argue with you that it's not the case,
Yeah.
but that's not what the definition is. You know,
Well, you know, it's,
you're adding words to the definition. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think the way to deal with that is, like I said, I would be supportive of going with a public hearing on this, simply because that way you get to explain what it is that's there, why it's like that. And that's something that can be factored into the decision-making process. What I'm
right.
concerned about is if we don't take that into consideration, it also offers up grounds for appealing any decision that's made on this application.
If I may interject something right here, Megan.
Yes.
I think we can hear what Mr. Hannon is saying. I think we can accept that, and he's offered some good advice strategically with regard to how to approach an application and to make sure there aren't going to be issues at the other end. Where that leaves us, we've got a position. I think we should follow up with DEEP, but understanding that the commission may not be comfortable with taking that next step based on, even if DEEP comes back and says, yeah, we don't think you have jurisdiction. He's correct in that the statute doesn't give us an out. The regs don't give us an out. And the next step then would be just to make our case, which I think we definitely can make, that there are no negative impacts as a result of this, because those soils are not serving any wetland function whatsoever.
And I agree with what you're saying. You know, but again, I think it needs to be part of the record on something like that. And I know you've done your homework on this. I think that's really the time to go ahead and make that presentation. So I'm just looking at this from a larger picture and not just trying to, you know, make things a little too narrow in terms of scope. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I know Robert was also talking about it. I don't think anybody else mentioned anything about that. And we also didn't talk about if anybody wanted to do a site walk on this as well. So I'll just throw that out. Rich, I mean, what's your take?
I would definitely feel that this is significant, and a site walk we should have a site walk.
Okay, Dave?
I would agree with both of those things.
Okay, and Robert?
Same here, public hearing and site walk.
I don't know if Mark has said anything.
Yep, significant and site walk in the chat feature.
Okay, and Ned?
Yeah, I think it is significant. I think, you know, the three of the buildings are within, are largely into the upland review area. The floodplain lines come pretty close to the corners of several of the buildings. I just think we need to make sure we go through every process on this. So I would support a site visit, and I think it is significant.
Okay, so Shannon, I mean, do you want to work with folks to schedule a site visit, preferably not during one of these thunderstorms we've been getting recently?
Yeah, so absolutely. In the agenda review, I had suggested a weekday evening or the Saturday, the 17th, or Sunday, the 18th. We can do 8:30 or 9:30, 9 start time on the Saturday or Sunday morning. Unfortunately, since I've done the agenda review, I now have a conflict on the 14th. So I'm already booked every night of the week of the 12th. I have something the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. So I will not be able to do a site walk that week during the evening. It will have to be the Saturday or Sunday morning.
Okay, so
So
that
I
would
can-
be
17th or 18th.
17th or 18th. I mean,
I'm happy to do an email to solicit feedback from the commission and get a consensus on a date and time, and then follow up with the applicant.
okay, I mean, that sounds reasonable at this point in time.
Okay.
And I think everybody pretty much has the idea that this could be a significant activity, and that looking for a public hearing. So, I mean, I don't want to waste time on this. So, you know, I don't want to say, let's wait until the next meeting and then maybe decide, although it may end up being the same date. But would somebody like to make a motion as this being a significant activity?
So can we make a motion to accept the application first,
I
please?
apologize. Yes.
No problem. Thank
Would
you.
somebody care to make a motion to accept the application, please?
So moved by Robert.
Is there a second?
Dave will second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining? Okay. Now, can we do the amendment or the motion for the significant activity?
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Sure.
there's the significant activity by definition. There's also the opportunity for the commission to determine that this is a significant project that warrants a public hearing, which I believe is really what the commission found for their last major application. It's a slight nuance, but the terminology may make a difference going forward.
No, I thank you for the clarification. I do believe that is more of what we're saying is this could be a significant project, not necessarily a significant activity. And yes, we do know that that has ramifications down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if somebody would care to make a motion that this is a significant project,
So move, Stanchion.
is there a second?
Second by Eisner.
Okay. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining? Okay,
Okay, and based on schedule, since the commission does not meet in August, then that will be the public hearing will be the first meeting in September, which is September 1st. So just FYI. Okay.
Very good.
Just for the record too, so that we have it, Mark has chimed in on the chat and has agreed with the motions that have been made and confirmed the motions made for accepting the application and the determination of a significant project that warrants a public hearing.
okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. Right, Mr. Chair, do you need anything else from this applicant this evening? Or are you all set?
No, I mean, I think they gave, you know, a lot of information that we'll need to digest. I think they've done a good job of, you know, going back and refining the project. So I don't have anything else that I'm looking for at this point in time.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I did think of one more question.
Sure.
So the area between the buildings that are closest to the river and the riverbank, is that going to be a grass? Is that going to be left somewhat natural, a mix of both? Or I'm just wondering if it's going to be a lawn, and then we would hope that it, you know, follow our normal procedures with lawn care in these areas.
Phil, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, the details for that are shown on the planting plans. There are a whole series of, and you go back to that lower right in here. Use that as an example. Number 160, that's our number 160 storm basin. So we have various types of grasses specified for that, all native grasses. Any areas disturbed above that would be native grasses. For example, in this area that might be lawn, there might be a lawn, just hold on a second, Shannon, right through there, exactly. And areas immediately adjacent to the building where Shannon just had her cursor, we would have a slope mix on that crosshatched area, a special native grass mix that we wouldn't want people on, but that would be a slope mix. And then native grasses above that. And we would be looking to implement a relatively low and natural fertilization process for low levels of fertilization process around the buildings. You can see the darker color rendering along those edges. We'd be proposing habitat plantings of shrubs in those areas to keep people that might be on the lawn if they come out door of the building and they're sitting out there. We want to keep them out of the wetlands and out of the floodplain wooded areas. So we're sort of setting up fences with shrubbery. And all of that's shown on the plans further to the east as well.
Okay.
All detailed all of the shrubs, the grasses, different slope mixes, all on the plans.
No, that looks good. I see it now. The existing trees remain and then the different treatments you have. Okay, thank you.
And that curve, the curvy tree line edge, that's really the contract limit line that on the deed, on the legends, that also is represented in the contract limit line.
Okay.
Okay, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ned.
All righty. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and Megan will follow up, and obviously if there's any questions between now and then, feel free to reach out to me. We'll coordinate the site walk as well to land on a mutually agreeable day and time.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Holy cow.
Holy cow, yeah, we got lightning, we got cats and dogs outside.
And Dave, you walked tonight, right?
Dave did not.
I drove, but I did walk.
I figured you were close enough you'd walk it.
So I included in the agenda review and the attachments information. So the next item on the agenda is Plant 17, 1179 Farmington Avenue, and just an update on the restoration efforts. Understanding that we would probably run to this hour in the evening, I did not request the owner, his attorney, or any of their consultants to log on this evening. I know at the last meeting, I believe George Logan was on and provided an update, and Bruce Sear had worked closely with the owner and his crews on site the week that I was away, and Bruce shared photos, and there were summary updates. So I included all of that in attachments for all of you. So there were email updates from Bruce as well as photos. And there were drone photos. So I think unless someone has a question on something that Bruce sent, what I'll share are the latest drone photos I have, which are from June 30th, and then photos that their attorney, Bill Galsky, shared with me today. He was out on site today. With good news, it all shows that these basins are holding water as anticipated. So this is the drone footage from June 30th. And you can see the vegetation starting to take place. Here it's all starting to revegetate in the upland area. And you can see the plantings, and you can see they created little berms, basically straw berms around the planting areas in order to hold water within that that sloped embankment, that 8-to-1 slope that we agreed to. You can see on June 30th, there had been some water retention in the restoration area. And then this was getting out, this is the area beyond the restoration activities, and that area will be overseeded here. It just, and it may have been done already at this point, but it wasn't at the time of these photos. And then you can see here, this is the wetland creation area. You can see very clearly, and from the aerial, the stepped elevations. You can see the two deeper depression areas, and you can see some of the planting pods that were done. I believe the planting continued into early this week for finishing up. So that's it from the drone photos, and then from the photos that Bill shared that he took today. This is the wetland creation area. There's still erosion control around it, but you can see the inundation is definitely taking hold in both of the two lobes of the wetland creation area. That's another look at the wetland creation area, and it was as designed. There was a high point between the two lobes. I believe the exact configuration morphed a little bit. We did get an as-built of this prior to the plants going in, so that was done and was reviewed on site. And it wasn't, you know, there's, like I said, a give and take of that. So there's three photos of that that restoration area, and it's holding water. Sorry, that's the creation area, holding water. So it seems to be in good shape. I think they're still looking to have the monitoring wells installed. I'm not seeing those in any of the photos. And Sigrun, their biologist, will be on site next week taking a look at the plant health and just making sure things are starting to emerge and remain healthy as anticipated. So we are quickly going from construction installation to monitoring phases at this particular point in time. So if anyone has any questions, I'll do what I can to answer, or jot the questions down and get answers for you if there's any questions regarding any of this.
I mean, I don't have any. I don't know if anybody else does.
No question. Sounded good. Thanks.
Okay.
No,
All
it's
right.
starting to look good.
Yeah, no, it is. It's been fun to be out there. Found some interesting critters too. A couple of snakes, couple of ribbon snakes, couple of black snakes. So I am going to move along then to planners report items. And these I did not, since I had so many other attachments open, I did not go ahead and update these or open all these initially. So I'm going to do that real quick. So 402 Farmington Avenue is the first item on the planner's report agenda. And I got something in my chat. I'm encouraged that this new wetland. Okay, Mark chimed in and said progress looks great. I'm encouraged that this new wetland area will function as planned. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So 402 Farmington Avenue, as you know, or I think you may know if I think I kept you up to date on some of these things. The Town Plan and Zoning Commission approved the zone change and the site plan for the proposed apartment complex, but denied the 4th story and 45-foot height. So what the applicant is doing is returning to the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. They'll be in front of Town Plan and Zoning next Monday on July 12th for a site plan modification to remove the 4th floor and then close off the loop. You'll recall the original plan had an opening here. The building stopped here, and then it just had a small hook here on that south end. And the applicant is putting forth an application that will be 3 floors at its maximum height, They did convert some additional of the garage spaces, the first floor garage spaces. They had already converted some of these on the south side. They converted some of the underspace garage on the first floor here to apartments. And with that conversion, as well as closing this loop, brought them back to an apartment count of 130. The approved plan that had been approved at TPZ with the zone change and the site plan approval had 131. So it's a drop of apartment count of 1 down to 130. Megan had completed a memo because I wanted to make sure there was nothing else from a wetland standpoint or regulated area up in this area, that when they close this off, if there were any changes, and that is not the case. So everything was already in that's shown here was already part of a disturbed area. So it doesn't change the regulated activity. There's no new regulated activity within an upland area as part of this modification. The impervious coverage actually ends up being slightly lower by a modest amount. So there's no change to the storm drain system. So there are no items with respect to this site plan modification that are warranting them coming back to you for any type of modification. But since it's on the agenda, and given that obviously it's under appeal with the Wetlands Commission, I wanted to make sure that you folks were aware of the changes that were taking place, and that we did evaluate it to make sure there was nothing that was part of the changes to the plan that warranted coming back in front of you. And this has also been discussed with the attorneys, so the attorneys are well aware and are in concurrence as well. And again, if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain any questions regarding this.
I'm fine. How about anybody else?
I don't have any questions.
This is Rich, no questions.
Okay, I'm gonna move along then to the second item under the planner's report, and that is 15 Farm Springs Road. And this is to, let's see here, I'm gonna do this plan. So 15 Farm Springs Road is the former Marriott down where the UTC campus is off of Finneman Road. And as part of the agenda package that went out, of course, there's my summary. There was an email exchange between myself, Bob Hannon, and then myself forwarding this on to Robin Pearson, the attorney for the new property owner and applicant. So as what's going on with the Marriott is the new property owner and applicant is looking to land the special innovation zone at this location and convert the Marriott from a hotel and conference center to an apartment complex with some mixed use options. There'll be a restaurant, a coffee bar, and conference and meeting space that will be available. So that public access space will primarily be within this portion of the building. And then the hotel units, the rental units that had been in what they refer to as the A, B, and C wing and the E wing are going to be converted to apartments. As reviewing this application and the details, this has been quite a fast-paced application that's come through. And as we were going through staff comments with their applicant and engineer, we drilled in a little bit more as to expansion efforts that were taking place for building E and wing C. And what we found is for building E, the expansion efforts are really taking place where there is an underground garage So there is an underground garage located, the garage entrance is here, and you park underground, and the building footprint's here. So they are going to mill out pavement in this area and then expand 1 story to infill in this location. So there's no earth disturbance. It's a milling of pavement down to really what's a concrete slab for the ceiling of the underground garage that's below. And then they'll come up 1 floor. This is relevant because there is a wetland in the upper northern portion of the property. The property abuts Colt Highway and has its main access off of Farm Springs Road. There is no access off of Colt Highway, but this wetland system exists. It's really a drainage swale that runs along the Colt Highway edge. And so building E really is within the upland review area. You can see the 150-foot mark here. So this expansion in this location to add additional apartment units in this location would be in the upland review. But as I noted, because of how this building had been constructed, there's no earth disturbance. There's simply milling of the existing pavement. They'll fix the roof membrane for that concrete slab that's the roof of the garage, and then they'll go vertical. So there's no earth disturbance. So in discussing this with Bob, we both thought it was fine for them to proceed with the work at that location. The expansion that they're proposing on this face of the building, which is referred to as Wing C, however, again, is the same type, except there is earth exposure, and it will require the construction of a foundation and a 4-foot frost wall, and then the pouring of a slab. So they're going to have earth excavation out approximately 8 to 10 feet from the face of the building in order to form and pour the frost wall, and then pour the slab in order to infill. There's some piers. A portion of the building has balconies up above. There's piers supporting those balconies. So the thought was they were going to fill in between those piers and gain an extra roughly 5 feet of apartment space out to the edge of those piers. So, but because again, there's a wetland, a regulated area here to the east, there's a water course and a wetland. And when you extend, here's the 150-foot upland review limit through the middle of Wing C. And then this is the perimeter parking. So it's already a disturbed area, but there is earth disturbance, as I noted. And so there's things like erosion control and stormwater management that need to be considered, and certainly is regulated activity that needs to come before the commission. The final 2 elements are a little simpler from an explanation standpoint. The applicant was looking, there's a large parking area to the south edge of the property. So they're looking to install some tree wells and get additional trees in here to kind of break up the pavement area in the back. Again, there'll be earth disturbance. So the thought was that also is regulated. And as a staff comment, the staff was requesting that they look at getting some check dams in here to hold back water quality volume in this portion of the existing stormwater basin. The stormwater basin takes water not only from the development, there's a pipe system that's shown here on the plan. It also takes stormwater from offsite off of Farm Spring Road. And there's an inlet pipe here, and then the system outlets over here. And staff's just asking them to do some maintenance and to do some cutting back on the regular cutback on the embankment. There hasn't been any since this has been developed in the 80s. And also to install some check dams to try to hold back some of the water quality volume and make some stormwater improvements. So after speaking with Bob and then forwarding this information back to Robin Pearson and the applicant and explaining that, yes, at least 3 out of these 4 elements are regulated activities and require permitting with the Inland Wetland Commission. They have opted at this particular time to remove them from their scope of work so that they may proceed with TPZ on July 12th. They had opened their hearing initially with TPZ on June 26th. They were hoping for approval on that night, but there were outstanding items that staff needed to review with them. So it got held over to July 12th. So they have agreed to remove those elements from their current scope of work so that they can get approval on the 12th with TPZ. And then they will come back for these additional items and come to wetlands to be permitted for the regulated activity. And then we'll have to return to TPZ for site plan modification to incorporate this infill on Wing C, these trees, and any work that's agreed to with respect to the detention basin. So this is just an update so that the entire commission is aware of the conversations that took place, and to let you know that this will be forthcoming. It'll be in front of you, I anticipate in September. They're going to turn around and make that application quickly. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions, or Bob, if you want to.
Yeah, I just want to add one comment, and that is, I mean, I thought this was pretty straightforward. And based on what I've heard commission members say in the past, yes, I think it would have been a regulated activity. We could have taken the application and theoretically moved on it in the second meeting of this month. But for whatever reason, they're saying from a timing perspective, it didn't fit their schedule. So I have no idea what their schedule is, what they're up against. I don't know if there's federal money, state money, any kind of money involved in it to help them make their decision to rush forward. But I did pass on to Shannon, I believe she also passed it on to the attorney, that now that we know what it is they're proposing to do in the wetlands, they really had better not do anything in the wetlands until they actually have a permit to do it. Because if that's the case, I'm ready to go forward with a cease and desist if they start doing work in that area without a permit, especially knowing what they did. And it was their decision not to go forward with it. So
Yes,
that's
they
where
were.
that language comes from.
They were informed in writing that a cease and desist would be issued if they chose to proceed with any work prior to having a permit on those 3 elements, or any element really within a wetland or upland area that had not been previously discussed. Yep. So yeah, they're very anxious. They've already started interior building demo. So there is some type of financial time frame that they're working on that that framed their decision-making process and why they had to proceed and redact this information for now, proceed on July 12th, and then come back and get the rest of this taken care of from a permitting standpoint. So again, if there's any other questions or comments, concerns, happy to address anything. Nope. Okay. That's it. That's all I had for planners report this evening.
So we're now actually at the minutes.
Yes, sir.
Is that part of my agenda acceptable?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 16th?
So moved, Statute.
Is there a second?
Dave will second.
Any questions, comments, corrections? Hearing nothing, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining? So we'll close wetlands at 9:54 and at 9:54 we'll start conservation. So unless you change this on me too, the first item for other business is land acquisition.
For the
No meeting.
record, I did send it to you.
I'm not saying you didn't. It's just that I hadn't printed it off because I've been involved in some other things.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right. Just, so we're all on the same page. Yes, sir. It would be a land acquisition committee report, but I don't believe they still haven't met, huh?
No, they haven't met.
Okay. So there is no
We're
land.
supposed to meet tomorrow,
Okay. And that's still on as far as everyone knows?
as far as I haven't got anything, but they seem to come kind of late in the game.
Sandy's saying she didn't see an agenda come through, so maybe we'll check in with the town council liaison, who's the,
I mean, based on what you're telling me, Shannon, the time they start the meeting is about the time they start taking down the barricades on Farmington Avenue.
well, this is true. The land acquisition meeting, you're correct. The land acquisition meeting normally starts around 5 and
Yep.
yes, that's the barricades come down on Farmington Avenue.
If they are having the meeting, just give yourself enough time. That's all I'm saying.
Creating the fortress of Farmington Avenue. So I guess there is no land acquisition committee report,
Okay.
and I don't think I have anything. I do have a quick thing for a planner's report. Our textile recycling, simple recycling, is going to be changing its format, and you will be seeing this in the upcoming town newsletter. The summer newsletter should be hitting everyone's mailboxes next week, God willing, because the change to the program takes place the following week and it's being announced in the newsletter. So the program's going to change. So rather than the textile recycling being picked up the same day as your recycling, it is going to be scheduled. So if anyone's used the Heart Springs program, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, you can, for simple recycling, you'll be able to log into their website. When you log in, you enter our zip code, both Farmington and Unionville. It'll be activated, and then you will be able to schedule. There'll be a couple of set dates. So typically there's, you'll be able to see 2, maybe 3 dates out from when you log in, and select a day that then is convenient for you based on what's available, and put your textile recycling out on that particular day. And they're going to actually have us keep it either like on our front step or front porch rather than out at the curb. One of the things they were having trouble with were bags and articles being stolen. So the hope is with changing to this system, it will reduce the theft and also increase convenience, and it should reduce our missed pickup experience, which at varying times had been more or less problematic depending upon what was going on. So, so that's going to be outlined in the newsletter and will be implemented starting July 19th.
Thank you.
And that's it. That's all I have from a
Okay,
financial report.
so down to a motion to approve the minutes of June 16th.
Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
This is Rich, second.
Any questions, comments, corrections? Hearing nothing, those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Have a good night, folks.